My name is Natalie Archer. I'm 28 years old. Even now, months later, I still find myself staring at the ceiling some nights, replaying everything and wondering how I completely missed what was happening right in front of me. 2 years? That was how long Ethan and I were together. For the last 8 months of that relationship, we shared a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment downtown. We split everything evenly. Rent, utilities, groceries. We even shared responsibility for our cat, Moki. From the outside, we looked like a couple moving steadily toward marriage. We talked about engagement. He sent me screenshots of rings he liked. He joked about where we would honeymoon. Sometimes he would wrap his arms around me while I cooked dinner and casually talk about our future as if it were already guaranteed. Then one night, everything changed. Ethan sat across from me on the couch we had spent 3 hours arguing over at IKEA. His expression was strangely calm. Too calm. "I don't think I'm ready for something this serious," he said. I remember laughing, because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. The room suddenly felt smaller. "What do you mean?" I asked. He looked away. "I need to find myself." Those words, I swear. Every breakup comes with the same script. I feel like I'm missing experiences. Experiences. The word echoed inside my head. I asked the question everyone asks. Is there someone else? His reaction was immediate. Offended. Almost insulted. "Natalie, this isn't about another woman." Then, what was it about? Personal growth. Self-discovery. Freedom. Every explanation sounded rehearsed. But I wasn't going to beg someone to stay. So I nodded. Told him I understood. Then I locked myself in the bathroom and cried where he couldn't see me. The practical problem came afterward. We were both on the lease. Breaking it would cost thousands of dollars. Neither of us could afford that. So Ethan suggested something that sounded ridiculous. We could stay roommates until the lease ends. Roommates. After 2 years together, I should have laughed. Instead, I agreed. Because money was money. And because part of me still needed time to process what had happened. The first few weeks were unbearable. Ethan started coming home later and later, sometimes midnight, sometimes after 2 in the morning. His explanations were always vague. Friends, work events, networking, gym sessions. The stories kept changing. Meanwhile, I tried rebuilding myself. I started going to the gym. I read books again. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during the relationship. Most importantly, I stopped organizing my life around Ethan. At first it felt impossible. Then it started feeling good. Really good. And then Ryan appeared. It happened during a company happy hour. Nothing dramatic. No movie-style moment. No slow-motion entrance. He simply sat beside me and made me laugh. Ryan was 30. Smart. Confident. The kind of man who listened carefully before speaking. When I made a self-deprecating joke about being damaged after the breakup, he immediately shook his head. "Everybody has baggage," he said. "The important question is whether you're carrying it or letting it carry you." That line stayed with me. We exchanged numbers. Started texting. Then coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into another dinner. And before I realized it, I was looking forward to hearing from him every day. I told him everything up front. About Ethan. About the apartment. About the awkward roommate situation. Ryan listened carefully, then smiled. "Well, at least you're honest. That's your standard. Trust me," he said. "The bar is lower than you'd think." I laughed harder than I had in months. The relationship wasn't serious at first. Neither of us planned it that way. But comfort has a strange way of sneaking up on people, and before long, Ryan became the safest part of my week. Ethan noticed. Of course he noticed. One morning, while we were drinking coffee in the kitchen, he studied me carefully. "You seem happier." "I am." A strange expression crossed his face. For a moment, he looked disappointed. Then he forced a smile. "That's great." But it didn't sound great. It sounded threatened. I ignored the feeling. Until the birthday party. A mutual friend's celebration. Ryan came with me. Nothing excessive. No dramatic displays of affection. We simply looked like two people enjoying each other's company, holding hands, laughing, existing together. Then Ethan walked in. The second his eyes landed on us, something changed. I watched at least 10 different emotions flash across his face. Shock, confusion, disbelief, anger, panic. Then he recovered, approached us, introduced himself to Ryan. Everything appeared polite, civilized, normal. For a few hours, I convinced myself we'd all matured. I couldn't have been more wrong, because 48 hours later, my phone started ringing at 7 in the morning, over and over. Ethan. When I finally answered, he was crying, actually crying. And the first thing he said made my blood run cold. How could you do this to me? I sat upright in bed. What are you talking about? Ryan. The way he said the name sounded almost accusing. You've been seeing him for weeks. I stared at the phone, completely speechless. And as Ethan continued talking through tears, I suddenly realized something terrifying. The man who had walked away from me wasn't upset because he'd lost me. He was upset because I wasn't waiting for him anymore. And before that phone call ended, another discovery was already moving toward me like a storm. A discovery that would reveal why Ethan really ended our relationship, and why his so-called search for himself began weeks before our breakup ever happened. The call lasted nearly 20 minutes. Looking back, I wish I had hung up after the first 60 seconds. Instead, I listened, partly because I was shocked, partly because some irrational piece of me still cared about Ethan enough to understand why he was crying. I thought you'd wait, he said. His voice cracked. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall. Wait for what? For me to figure things out? The silence that followed felt surreal. You broke up with me. I needed space. You got space. It's only been 3 months. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. There was something deeply unsettling about being accused of moving on by the person who ended the relationship. What exactly is the acceptable waiting period? I asked. I don't know. You seem to have a number in mind. Natalie. His voice softened. I thought what we had meant more than that. I closed my eyes. What we had, he was the one who had thrown it away, not me. Yet somehow I was being treated like the villain. The conversation ended with him crying. Then came the texts, dozens of them, paragraph after paragraph. According to Ethan, I had betrayed his trust. I had moved on too quickly. I had deliberately hurt him. I had ruined any chance of reconciliation. I ignored every message. But the truth, part of me was shaken, not because I believed him, because I couldn't understand him. Nothing about his behavior made sense. Until 3 days later, that's when everything started falling apart. It happened because of an old iPad. Years earlier, Ethan and I had shared it for streaming services. Netflix, Hulu, random subscriptions. When we broke up, neither of us bothered removing our accounts. I honestly forgot it existed. Then one evening I was searching for a password when I noticed something strange. Messages were syncing. At first, I wasn't even looking. Then, a name caught my attention. Vanessa. My stomach tightened. Vanessa wasn't just any woman. She was Ethan's ex-girlfriend. The woman he'd always described as ancient history. The woman he claimed he barely spoke to anymore. I shouldn't have looked, maybe. But after the accusations he'd thrown at me, curiosity. One message became 10. 10 became 50. And suddenly I couldn't stop reading. My hands started shaking. Because Ethan's search for self-discovery looked a lot different inside those messages. There were photos, plans, hotel reservations, flirtation, late-night visits, and the timestamps. God, the timestamps. The affair hadn't started after our breakup. It had started nearly 2 weeks before it. 2 weeks before, he sat on that couch and told me he needed to find himself. I remember staring at the screen, while my heart pounded against my ribs. Not sadness, not even anger, just disbelief. Because suddenly, every confusing piece of the puzzle fit together. The late nights, the vague explanations, the emotional distance, the sudden need for freedom. There had been another woman all along. And the worst part, He had looked directly into my eyes and acted offended when I asked. I kept scrolling, and things got worse. Much worse. Apparently Vanessa believed Ethan and I had some kind of open arrangement. According to Ethan, we had already emotionally moved on from each other. According to Ethan, I was dating other people too. According to Ethan, everyone was perfectly happy. None of it was true, but he had told the lie so confidently that she believed him. Then I found messages discussing my apartment. My apartment. The apartment where Ethan and I still lived together. The apartment I was helping pay for. The apartment where he had apparently invited Vanessa multiple times. The realization hit like a truck. I actually had to put the iPad down and walk away. I paced around my room. Tried to breathe. Failed. Then paced some more. Because one horrifying possibility kept replaying in my head. Our bedroom. I didn't want to know. I really didn't. But, eventually, I picked the iPad up again. And found exactly what I feared. Photos. Conversation. References. Enough details to remove all doubt. Ethan had been sleeping with Vanessa in our bed, while I was working late shifts. I sat on the floor for nearly an hour. Not crying. Not moving. Just staring. The betrayal felt almost too large to process. Then, something unexpected happened. Instead of collapsing emotionally, I became calm, dangerously calm. Because a switch flipped inside me, I stopped viewing Ethan as the man I loved. I started seeing him as a problem to solve, aliar, a manipulator, a roommate, nothing more. The universe apparently wasn't done exposing him. A week later, I received an Instagram message. The sender's name was Chloe. I didn't recognize it. Her message was short. Hi. This is awkward. But did you used to date Ethan? My pulse immediately accelerated. I replied, yes. Then came the second message. Do you know Vanessa? And just like that, everything changed. Chris was Vanessa's current boyfriend. They had been together for almost 3 years. 3 years? She suspected something was happening. She didn't have proof, but her instincts were screaming at her. I stared at the message for a long time. This felt like one of those moments that determines who you are. I could ignore it. Lee. Stay out of it. Or tell the truth. Eventually, I opened the folder where I had saved everything. Screenshots. Message. Photos. Evidence. Then, I sent it all. Every single piece. The response came less than 5 minutes later. A phone call. Chris was crying. The kind of crying that comes from genuine devastation. Not anger. Not theatrics. Actual heartbreak. 3 years. She kept repeating it. Over and over. 3 years. I stayed on the phone with him for nearly an hour. By the end, he thanked me. Apologized for Ethan's behavior. Apologized for Vanessa. I told her she owed me nothing. We were standing in the same wreckage. Neither of us built it. The fallout arrived the next afternoon. I came home from work and nearly dropped my keys. Because Ethan was standing outside the apartment building waiting for me, and he looked terrified. Not guilty. Terrified. The moment he saw me, he started walking toward me. First, Natalie. What did you do? I already knew. Chris had confronted Vanessa. Vanessa had confronted Ethan. And the entire house of cards was collapsing. What are you talking about? You sent her everything. You mean the truth? His jaw tightened. You ruined people's lives. No. I stepped closer. You ruined people's lives. For the first time since our breakup, I saw genuine panic in his eyes. And that was when I realized something important. Ethan never expected to be caught. He thought everyone would keep believing his stories. What he didn't realize was that his biggest lie was about to walk through the apartment door herself, because less than an hour later, Vanessa arrived, and she had questions neither of us were prepared to answer. Vanessa showed up just before 6 o'clock. The second I opened the apartment door, I knew she had already learned enough to be dangerous. Her eyes were red, mascara smeared, phone clenched tightly in one hand. Behind me, Ethan was standing in the kitchen, pretending to scroll through his phone. The act lasted about 3 seconds. Then he saw her face. Everything changed. Vanessa, don't. Her voice cut through the apartment like a knife. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then she turned toward me. Did you know? I blinked. Know what? She laughed. A bitter, exhausted laugh. The open relationship. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because she genuinely believed it. Ethan had convinced her that he and I were emotionally separated, long before the breakup. That we were both seeing other people, that everything was honest, mutual, consensual. The expression on my face apparently told her everything. Slowly. The color drained from hers. Oh my God. She looked back at Ethan. You lied to me. Nessa. Let me explain. You said she knew. His silence answered for him. Vanessa looked like she might be sick. Then another realization struck her. The same realization that had shattered me days earlier. Our bed. She looked at me. I nodded once. That was enough. Vanessa started crying. Not because of me. Because she finally understood she had been manipulated too. Ethan stepped forward, trying desperately to regain control. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like. Nobody answered. Because there was no version of the story that made him look good, Vanessa left 15 minutes later. The apartment door slammed hard enough to shake the walls. And then, it was just Ethan and me. Alone. Again. For several seconds we simply stared at each other. The silence felt heavier than any argument. Finally, he spoke. You had no right. I laughed. Actually laughed. No right to what? Interfere. Interfere. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You cheated on me. It wasn't cheating. The statement was so ridiculous that I genuinely wondered if he believed it. We were basically over. We were together. We were struggling. Ethan. I stepped closer. We were discussing engagement rings. That shut him up. For a moment. Then came the anger. The real anger. Not sadness. Not guilt. Anger. Because people who lose control often mistake consequences for betrayal. You wanted revenge. No. You wanted to destroy my life. No. You couldn't handle me moving on. That one actually hurt. Because it revealed how little he understood me. Or maybe how little he ever understood anyone. This was never about revenge. I pointed toward the door. Vanessa had just walked through. This happened because you lied. His expression hardened. The conversation was over. But the war was just beginning. The next few weeks felt like living with a stranger, or maybe living with the real Ethan for the first time. Because whatever mask he'd worn during our relationship was gone. Completely gone. At first the changes were subtle. Then they became impossible to ignore. Women started showing up constantly. Different women, different nights, different stories. Sometimes he barely bothered introducing them. Sometimes he acted as though I didn't exist. The apartment transformed into chaos. Loud music after midnight. Arguments. Drunken laughter. Doors slamming. Dishes piling up. Clothes scattered across shared spaces. And through it all, Ethan seemed determined to make sure I noticed. At first, I considered confronting him. Then I remembered something important. Our roommate agreement. When we originally decided to stay together temporarily after the breakup, I insisted on creating one. He mocked me for it, called it dramatic. Then signed it anyway. Guest policies. Noise restrictions. Shared space expectations. Everything documented. Everything clear. And now he was violating nearly every section, so I started documenting too. Quietly. Patiently. Photos. Timestamps. Recordings. Incident logs. Everything. I kept detailed records of every disturbance. Every overnight guest. Every complaint from neighbors. Every violation. The more evidence I collected, the clearer the pattern became. This wasn't random behavior. It was retaliation. He wanted me uncomfortable, miserable, maybe even desperate enough to leave. Unfortunately for him, I had become very good at patience. Ryan noticed the change immediately. One night we were watching a movie in the living room when Ethan brought another woman home. The woman looked embarrassed. Ethan looked smug. Ryan simply watched, then waited until the bedroom door closed. Your ex is spiraling. That was the perfect word. Spiraling. Because Ethan wasn't acting like someone enjoying freedom. He was acting like someone losing control. The situation reached another level 2 weeks later. I filed a formal complaint with property management. Every document, every photo, every violation. 47 pages. I still remember the number 47. The property manager called 3 days later. They were opening an investigation. When Ethan received notification, he exploded. Absolutely exploded. The shouting started before I even finished work that day. The moment I walked through the apartment door, he was waiting. You filed a complaint. Yes. You psycho. I dropped my purse on the counter. You violated the lease repeatedly. We could have talked. We did. You never said anything. I shouldn't have to explain why noise complaints at 3 in the morning are a problem. He looked furious, but underneath the anger was fear. Real fear. Because for the first time, consequences were becoming official. Then he played what he thought was his strongest card. I'll tell Ryan everything. I almost smiled. Everything. About how you're obsessed with me? I stared at him. You can't be serious. You still love me. No. You're trying to get rid of me because you can't move on. The level of delusion was becoming impressive. Then, his expression changed. And suddenly I knew something was wrong. Very wrong. The next thing he said made my stomach drop. I already messaged him. For a second, I couldn't breathe. What? Ethan smiled. A small, satisfied smile. The kind that appears when someone believes they've finally won. And that's when I discovered he'd sent Ryan an elaborate story about how I was secretly begging Ethan to take me back. According to the message, I was using Ryan as a rebound, manipulating him, lying to him, pretending to move on. Ethan believed the relationship was about to collapse. What he didn't know was that Ryan had already read the message, and his response was about to destroy the last illusion Ethan still had. I found Ryan sitting in his apartment when I arrived that evening. My heart was pounding. Not because I thought Ethan was telling the truth, because lies have a way of creating damage even when nobody believes them. Ryan opened the door, holding a glass of wine. He looked calm, almost amused, which immediately confused me. You got the message. Oh. I got the message. I groaned. I'm so sorry. Ryan stepped aside and let me in. Then he handed me his phone. I read Ethan's message. It was somehow even worse than I expected. According to Ethan, I had confessed my undying love for him only days earlier. According to Ethan, I cried constantly about losing him. According to Ethan, I was manipulating Ryan to make Ethan jealous. The entire thing sounded like a badly written soap opera. When I finished reading, I looked up. Ryan was trying not to laugh. That's why you're smiling. He wrote 6 paragraphs. So, he never once mentioned you. I blinked. What? Ryan sat down. Read it again. I did. And suddenly I understood. Every sentence was about Ethan. His feelings. His pain. His importance. His suffering. His perspective. Natalie misme. Natalie wants me back. Natalie is obsessed with me. Natalie is using you because she can't get over me. Ryan shook his head. This isn't about love. Then he said the same thing that would later become one of the most accurate observations I'd ever hear. This is about control. The next day, Ryan came to the apartment. Not because he needed proof, not because he doubted me, because he was curious, and maybe because neither of us expected what happened next. Ethan was home. The moment he saw Ryan walk through the front door, a smug smile appeared on his face. He genuinely believed his plan had worked. He thought Ryan was there to break up with me. Ryan looked at him, then looked around the apartment, then back at Ethan. Oh. The single word immediately confused him. Oh. Ethan repeated. Ryan nodded. Now I understand. Understand what? Ryan smiled politely. The problem. The smug expression disappeared. Slowly, painfully, Ryan continued. You aren't upset because Natalie moved on. Ethan's jaw tightened. You don't know what you're talking about. I do. Ryan sat calmly on the couch. You lost control of the story. The silence was immediate, heavy, dangerous. Ryan didn't stop. You ended the relationship. You don't understand. You wanted freedom. Ryan raised a hand. Let me finish. To this day, I still remember every word, because watching Ryan dismantle Ethan's excuses felt like watching a surgeon perform an operation. Precise, methodical, unavoidable. You wanted Natalie available while you figured yourself out. Ryan said, you expected her life to pause while yours continued. That's ridiculous. Is it? Ryan leaned forward. When she started healing, you panicked. No. When she met someone else, you panicked. No. When she stopped centering her life around you, you panicked. Ethan's face was turning red. Ryan's voice remained calm. Steady. Un emocional. The affair isn't the biggest issue. That caught Ethan off guard. What? The cheating is awful, Ryan said, but the real problem is entitlement. Nobody spoke. Ryan continued. You genuinely believe everyone should organize their lives around your emotions. The words hit harder than shouting ever could. Because deep down, Ethan knew they were true. You think you're the main character? Ryan stood. And now you're angry because Natalie stopped reading from your script. Ethan looked at me, desperate, almost pleading, as if he expected me to defend him. I didn't, because for the first time, I finally saw the entire picture. The breakup, the affair, the manipulation, the guilt trips, the lies, every piece connected. Ethan wasn't heartbroken. He was losing influence. And he couldn't handle it. The confrontation ended with him storming out, but things escalated quickly afterward. 3 days later, property management completed their investigation. The evidence was overwhelming. Noise violation, unauthorized overnight guests, repeated complaints, documented disturbances. The decision arrived by email. Unfortunately, it wasn't exactly what I expected. They agreed Ethan had violated lease terms. They agreed my documentation was legitimate. They agreed the living environment had become hostile. But they also decided the situation had become too volatile. The solution? Neither of us would remain. Both tenants would receive 30 days to vacate. No lease termination penalties. No additional fees. But the security deposit would be forfeited. I was furious. For about an hour. Then, reality settled in. The apartment had become poisoned. Every room carried memories. Arguments. Betrayals. Disappointments. Maybe leaving wasn't punishment. Maybe it was freedom. Ethan reacted differently. He completely lost control. The screaming started almost immediately. You did this? I looked around the apartment. No. You got us kicked out. You got us kicked out. He threw a glass against the wall. It shattered, pieces scattering across the floor. For the first time, I genuinely felt unsafe. And I think he realized it. Because he froze, suddenly aware of what he'd done. The next morning he moved most of his belongings out. Not quietly, not maturely. Every trip involved slamming doors, complaining, making dramatic phone calls, trying to attract attention. Then came social media. That was his final weapon. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, anywhere people would listen. According to Ethan, I had manipulated the property manager. According to Ethan, I had emotionally abused him. According to Ethan, I had ruined his life. For a few days, the posts gained attention. Then people started asking questions. Difficult questions. Questions requiring evidence. Questions Ethan couldn't answer. Eventually, mutual friends began correcting the story publicly. One post disappeared. Then another. Then another. Within a week, almost everything was deleted. The narrative had collapsed. Again, I thought that was the end. I really did. I found a beautiful one-bedroom apartment closer to work. Mochi settled in almost immediately. Ryan spent more nights there. Life became peaceful, quiet, normal. For the first time in months, I could breathe. But peace has a strange habit of arriving right before one final storm, because 1 month after moving out, I received a message from someone I never expected. Ethan's mother. And the truth she revealed would explain everything. The message arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting at my desk, eating a sad little salad, and pretending to care about spreadsheets, when my phone vibrated. Unknown number. Normally, I ignored those. For some reason, I didn't. The text was simple. Natalie. This is Linda, Ethan's mother. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I've seen some things online, and I was hoping we could talk. I think I need to hear your side. I stared at the screen. For a moment, I considered deleting it. Nothing good ever seemed to come from conversations involving Ethan anymore. Then, curiosity won. That had been both my greatest strength and greatest weakness throughout this entire mess. An hour later, I called her. The first thing she said surprised me. I'm sorry. No accusation, no blame, no defensive mother protecting her son. Just a quiet apology. Why are you apologizing? I asked. There was a long pause. Because I think Ethan hasn't been honest. That immediately got my attention. According to Ethan's social media version of events, I was a controlling ex-girlfriend who had destroyed his life. Apparently, that wasn't the story he had been telling his family. Or at least not successfully. Linda Sahil. He told us, you cheated. I almost laughed. He told us, you manipulated the property manager. Another lie. He told us you became obsessed after the breakup. I closed my eyes. Of course he had. Because every story Ethan told cast him as the victim. Always. Without exception. I just want the truth. Linda said quietly. So I told her everything. The breakup. The affair. Vanessa. The lies. The investigation. The social media attacks. The documentation. Every piece of it. She listened without interrupting. When I finally finished, there was silence on the other end. Then came the sentence that changed everything. This explains a lot. My stomach tightened. What does that mean? Another sigh. A tired one. The sigh of someone who had spent years watching the same disaster repeat itself. Ethan has done versions of this before. I sat upright. What? Linda sounded exhausted. Not exactly the same, but similar. And then she told me a story that made my skin crawl. Apparently this pattern stretched all the way back to high school. Relationships beginning intensely. Promises. Future plans. Declarations of love. Then boredom. Restlessness. A search for excitement. A new woman, waiting quietly in the background. Then a breakup designed to make him the victim. Every time, for over a decade, I thought he'd eventually grow out of it. Linda's voice cracked slightly. I really believed he would. The sadness in her voice felt genuine. Not because she was excusing him, because she was disappointed, deeply disappointed. I'm sorry you got caught in it. For a moment, I actually felt sorry for her. Imagine watching your child make the same destructive choices over and over. Imagine knowing exactly where the road ends and being unable to stop them. We ended the call shortly afterward. I thought that was the final chapter. I was wrong. 3 days later, LinkedIn notified me that someone had viewed my profile. Ethan. I ignored it. Then another notification arrived, and another, and another. 7 profile views in one day. The behavior was strange, obsessive, uncomfortable. Then came the email. Subject, can we talk? I should have deleted it. Instead, I opened it. The message was almost 3 pages long. According to Ethan, he had made a terrible mistake. He missed me. He had started therapy. He was changing, growing, learning. He finally understood what we had. What he lost? How special our relationship had been. Then came the part that nearly made me choke on my coffee. He wanted another chance. Not immediately. Not pressure. Just coffee. Conversation. Closure. Maybe more, if it felt right. The audacity was breathtaking. Especially considering one detail. Ryan and I were still together. And Ethan knew that. He even mentioned Ryan in the email, claiming he respected my relationship. Claiming he only wanted closure. Closure apparently required 3 pages of emotional manipulation. I forwarded the email to Ryan. His response arrived 30 seconds later. The audacity is almost impressive. Almost. I laughed so hard I startled Mochi. The cat glared at me and immediately went back to sleep. I never replied to Ethan. That should have been enough. It wasn't. The missed calls started 2 days later. 17 in one morning. 7 then texts. I know you read my email. Can you please respond? I deserve that much. Then another, are you happy? Then another, just tell me if you're happy. Then another, actually, I don't answer that. Forget it. Then another, no. Answer it. I need to know. The messages grew more emotional as the day progressed, then more aggressive, then emotional again. The emotional whiplash was exhausting. I blocked the number. Problem solved. At least that's what I thought. An hour later, my phone rang. Different number. His work phone. I declined the call. He left a voicemail. According to Ethan, blocking him was immature. According to Ethan, refusing contact proved I still had feelings. Because apparently respecting boundaries was now evidence of unresolved love, Ryan listened to the voicemail with me. When it ended, he looked genuinely concerned. You know this isn't normal. Right. I know. You might need a restraining order. For the first time, I seriously considered it. Because the situation no longer felt pathetic, it felt unstable. Then something happened that finally removed any remaining doubt. A week later, I stopped by a small bar near my old office. Just one drink. A quiet evening. Nothing special. And sitting alone at the counter was the last person I expected to see, Vanessa. For a moment, we simply stared at each other. Then she laughed. Not happily, more like someone recognizing another survivor after a shipwreck. Well, she said, this is awkward. 20 minutes later, we were sharing appetizers and comparing notes. And what Vanessa revealed made everything make sense. Because it turned out Ethan hadn't been juggling 2 women. Or 3. Or even 4. The real number was far worse. According to information that surfaced after everything exploded, Ethan had been telling different stories to multiple women at the same time. Different versions of reality. Different promises. Different identities. Different futures. Each woman believing she was seeing the real Ethan. Each woman receiving a customized performance. The realization hit me harder than any betrayal had, because suddenly I understood something. The man I mourned after the breakup never truly existed. He was a character, a role, a carefully constructed version designed for whoever happened to be watching. When I got home that night, I found Ryan sitting on the couch, with Mochi asleep beside him. He immediately knew something was wrong. What happened? I sat down beside him. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Then, I finally said the truth. I don't think I ever really knew him. Ryan wrapped an arm around my shoulders. And for the first time in months, that realization didn't make me sad. It made me free. Because you can't lose something that never actually existed. The next morning brought one final surprise. An email. Different address. Different subject line. The truth. This time, Ethan admitted everything. The cheating. The lies. The manipulation. The affairs. Every single piece. But even then, accountability came with conditions. He blamed fear, vulnerability, self-sabotage, loving me too much. The usual excuses dressed in therapy language. The email ended with a sentence I read 3 times. What we had was real for me. Maybe it was. Maybe parts of it were. But real love doesn't require deception. It doesn't require backups. It doesn't require multiple versions of the truth. I never responded. Instead, I forwarded the email to Linda. A few hours later, she replied, "We're getting him help." I'm so sorry. That was the last communication I ever had with anyone from Ethan's family. Today, life is quieter. Ryan and I are still together. Mochi still sleeps wherever he wants. The trust issues haven't disappeared completely. Sometimes when Ryan's phone buzzes unexpectedly, old fears try to resurface. Sometimes betrayal leaves fingerprints that take a while to fade. But healing is happening. Slowly, honestly. The difference is that Ryan never asks me to ignore reality. He never asks me to doubt myself. And that's worth more than any grand romantic gesture. Looking back, the biggest lesson wasn't about cheating, or heartbreak, or revenge. It was this. When someone tells you they're not ready for something serious, believe them. And when someone shows you who they really are, you believe that too. The first time, not the 17th. One last thing before I end this story. A lot of people asked about Mochi. Yes. Mochi stayed with me. Ethan claimed he bought most of the cat supplies. Unfortunately for him, I kept receipts for everything. Literally everything. As I'm writing this, Mochi is stretched across my keyboard, making typing almost impossible. Which, honestly, feels like the happiest ending any of us could have hoped for.